All right, everyone, welcome to those of you that will be watching this later. So this is another faculty in residence and WHISK collaboration. We're bringing you a virtual cooking workshop. So today we have the Black History Month edition. We have a lot of interesting recipes and cooking demos for you. Also a short presentation about Black History Month in the beginning. So the first thing that I want to do, as always, to introduce Professor Jamie Kubota, who's a professor in the Department of Nutrition, Food Science, and Packaging. And I'll allow her to say a few words about WHISK to present her initiative, and then we'll pass it over so that the students will be leading the demonstration today, the cooking demonstration today. I can say a few words about themselves and what they're going to be cooking for us. So the floor is yours, Jamie.
Thank you, Etienne. So welcome, everyone. I'm Jamie Kubota. I teach in the nutrition department, and we have a program called WHISK, which stands for Wellness and Health Inspired Student Kitchens. And we recruit nutrition students to lead student-led nutrition education and cooking demonstrations for our campus community. So tonight we have some community nutrition students. These are senior nutrition students who are going to be presenting on Black History Month and also doing a cooking demonstration. So I'm going to turn it over to Valerie now to introduce her team. Valerie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie. I'm a brand ambassador for WHISK, and I'm going to be cooking today with my assistant Ryan. And today we're going to be making West African groundnut stew and a no-bake peanut butter cookie. And before we get started, we're going to do a little presentation on Black History Month, and we're going to take it to Mercedes, who's going to present for us today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mercedes. I'm here to give you just a little crash, like fun facts about Black History Month. So this is discussion on the discussion and demonstration for West African ground stew with WHISK from the Department of Nutrition, Food Science, and Packaging in collaboration with the faculty in residence. Next slide, please. The importance of Black History Month. Black History Month is important because it celebrates African American history. It allows understanding African Americans' experiences and contributions in this country. There have been a lot of outstanding African American individuals in our history, like a few I have here. Frederick Douglass, Rosa Parks, Louis Armstrong, and W.E.B. Du Bois. And also, it brings awareness, Black History Month brings awareness to everybody because it helps us reflect on like all of the opportunities that we have today. And, you know, if it wasn't for these individuals such as these, we would have, I don't know where we would be, to be honest. Can next slide, please? Why February? Okay, so there's this historian, his name is Carter G. Woodson, and he was a pioneer in the field of African American studies. So during the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, he attended a 3-week celebration, and he and 4 others founded what we call the Association of the Study of Negro Life and History. And the purpose of this association was to bring attention to African American studies, because during the time, they didn't teach African American studies at schools. So this group, the association, wanted to bring attention to that. And then during the 1940s, the African American communities had turned February into Negro History Month. And from the 1940s into the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, it transformed into Black History Month. And so during February, there was a lot of celebrations because Frederick Douglass, President Abraham Lincoln, and W.E.B. Du Bois all shared birthdays during that month. So it was a big celebration, and that's how it became Black History Month. And President Gerald Ford was the one that urged Americans to participate in the observance of Black History Month. Next slide, please. Okay, so African slaves brought foods to America that we still consume today. And some examples are yams, peanuts, watermelon, and rice. And today we're gonna highlight the peanut. So how did the peanuts come to America? So during the Columbian Exchange, the Spanish explorers not discovered, I always want to say discovered, but were introduced to peanuts in northern Mexico. So from there they took it back to Spain, where they took it to Asia and then Africa. So during the slave trade, with the slaves, they also brought the peanuts with them to the southern part of the United States, where they were widely planted. Next slide, please. Okay, so peanuts are used in African cuisine. So like I mentioned before, with the Spanish explorers bringing it to Africa, in West Africa, where they were mostly planted and used in cuisine. And they're used in soups, stews, marinades, and sauces. On the northern side of Africa, they use it for rubs or for marinades. And peanut oil is also used. And this picture is a beef and peanut stew. It's some sort of stew, but not the one we're gonna make tonight. Next slide, please. So peanuts are used in American cuisine. The first one I put is the peanut butter, because I think that everybody's familiar with peanut butter and has had some sort of interaction with peanut butter before. And the boiled peanuts are a Southern specialty. A lot of chefs, I read this blog, chefs around the country that are exploring African flavors in cities such as DC, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, and all of the major cities you could think of. And they're also used in desserts such as peanut brittle, peanut butter cups, Cracker Jack, cookies, and candies. Oh, and another fun fact is that, I don't know if you guys ever heard of goober. It's like this striped peanut butter and jelly. I used to love it when I was a kid. So the word goober comes from the Congo name peanuts. So it's Nuba, I think it's like Nguba. So that's pretty cool. Next slide, please. So in today's cooking demonstration, we're going to be doing the West African groundnut stew and the no-bake peanut butter cookies. So now I'm gonna leave it to Valerie and Ryan. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for this very informative presentation, Mercedes.
Any questions that come up before we segue into cooking?
Maybe just one question I have is beyond kind of stews and desserts, are there any other dishes in which peanuts are used in African American cuisine, like in soul food?
Mercedes, do you want to take it or do you want me?
Yeah, so I did, because I took food culture with Professor Billings, and we talked about this, about soul food and how they gave the slaves like certain kinds of food, like molasses, I think was one, peanuts, and just, I think like, what are they called? Like the sweetbreads of animals. And then from there, they like started to make dishes. But I was trying to research, like I mentioned to Professor Kubota earlier that I wanted to know, like, what are African, like in Africa, are eating now? Like what are they eating now?
It's really incorporated a lot into stews. And so what was brought over were some of the foodstuffs. So peanuts were certainly brought over. They were found in Mexico, but they weren't common in the Americas, where the United States is now, until the slaves were brought. And they were brought as a food to feed the slaves, because they wanted to have some foods that the slaves would eat. And so this was something that they were used to there. And whether it was peanuts or other forms of legumes like that, called ground nuts. So there's a variety of them, right? And along with that, they brought these foods, they brought some of their cooking techniques. So stews are very common in Africa. In many parts of Africa, they eat stews. They often eat them with like a starchy component called fufu, and it would be made out of some sort of starch, and maybe even with their hands. So they take a little bit of the starchy component and pick up the stew and eat it. they brought that cooking technique to the Americas. And so the early slaves, when they were feeding themselves, they utilized these cooking techniques. So they made a lot of stews. It was something that could cook over the fire while they were out working. They incorporated the vegetables that they were familiar with. So things like peanuts and greens and yams, which are sweet potatoes for us, right? They incorporated all of those things, and they were given rations, as Mercedes said. So they were given rations of cornmeal, and they were given parts of the pig. So they usually were given the parts of the pig that would have been thrown away. So that's where you get the innards and the tripe and the cracklin or the chitterlings, which would be the pig skin, right? That was given to the slaves to use. And so they learned how to utilize all these kind of parts and rations and developed their own foods from it. And that's really what evolved into soul food. So we still see a lot of these things consumed today. Chitterlings are still very common. Pork is still very common, but in modern day, we see more parts of the pork, and we see other things incorporated as well. But certainly peanuts are still a big part of the South. If it's peanut butter, peanut soup, peanut stews, so this type of stew would have been included in that, and all kinds of peanut-based desserts. Certainly Cracker Jack, for example, includes peanuts, and it's at every baseball game in America now, right? So a lot of these foods have now just become very mainstream America, but they were brought here with the slave trade. And it's the slaves that have really, or those African Americans that have really developed these foods that we use today.
Thanks so much, Professor Kubota. It's just so easy to forget that the foods that we define as Americans often have just been borrowed or taken from other cultures. So I think it's a very kind of important point to make tonight. So thanks for that. Is there anyone else who has a question about the presentation, or are we all ready to move to the cooking demos? I don't want to rush it if some people would like to talk more.
I noticed that Jen mentioned she likes the boiled peanuts. That's kind of it's a very Southern thing, boiled peanuts. Can you explain to people what they are and how you have eaten them?
Yeah, so I used to live in Atlanta. That's where I got my PhD. And so there was lots of peanuts around, and you typically would find them when you were like traveling outside of the city. And I like to hike and stuff, so I would go out a lot. But it basically is like peanut butter inside of a shell. And so it's really good. It still has like a solid feel, but when you put it in your mouth, it kind of sort of just melts and tastes like peanut butter, but without like all the refined sugar and stuff. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, I would say across the South, peanuts are like what you get at a bar. It's totally bar food, and you eat the peanuts and you throw the shells on the floor. It's part of the fun. So it's hard to go to a place, go out without having peanuts included.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much here. San Jose, I don't know. We're also pretty multicultural. And so peanut butter is such an American thing. We eat it on sandwiches. In other countries, not so much. You go to Europe and they don't eat peanut butter so much. They eat Nutella.
Yeah.
But they don't so much have peanut butter. I remember living in France and I missed American things sometimes.
Yeah,
France is pretty ethnocentric, and so everybody was always like, "Oh, French food is so much better." I'm like, "Yeah, I love French food, but I also love American food." I missed it sometimes. And there was a little store called Thanksgiving. It was actually called Thanksgiving, the name of the store, and they sold peanut butter. So every once in a while, I'd go get a little bit of peanut butter.
Yeah, it also the breakfast culture in Europe is not the same as here. So they tend to eat way less in the morning. I found that difficult when I live in France too. People just have like really tiny things. There's one exception though. The Dutch have their own version of peanut butter, and they kind of like
butter.
The cookie butter. Yeah, and then
that's where cookie butter comes from.
Yeah, that's true. They have the speculoos butter, and then which is a kind of cookie, and also they have like one kind of peanut butter, but it's very, very salty compared to the one that we have.
I don't know
That's
it.
Interesting.
That sounds fun though.
All right. Well, so I propose that we move to the cooking demonstration unless there's other question. So I'll let the students who are leading the demonstration take it over from here.
No more questions?
I think we're
I'm gonna get started. So today, we're good? Okay. Today I'm gonna be making the West African groundnut stew, and my version is going to be the a vegetarian version. So in this case, I'm going to be using vegetable broth, and instead of chicken, I'll be using squash. So for starters, I have my pot on medium heat, and I'm going to add just a bit of oil. I'm then going to add some onions. I used about half a cup.
So Valerie is making the chicken version of, no, the vegetarian version of this. And Ryan is making the chicken version of the same stew.
Yes. With the onion, I'm going to add about half a cup of chopped carrots. I'm also going to add about half a teaspoon of minced garlic. And just a pinch of garlic. And we're just going to mix that. You guys hear that sizzle?
A little.
So we're just going to mix this until your onion starts to get a light brown color. So once it's a little bit, turning a little bit brown, you can go ahead and add your broth. I'm using 2 cups. And I'm just going to let that boil.
So Valerie, that's vegetable broth since you're making a vegetarian version.
Yes, vegetable broth. You can use, you can substitute this for water or use your own homemade broth or store bought, whatever you have on hand.
So Professor Kubota or Valerie, let us say that students are buying vegetable broth. Would you have any tips about what to buy, what to avoid in terms of nutritional value?
So yes, you can buy broth in a can or a box. They sell vegetable broth, they sell chicken broth, they sell beef broth. So you can buy any of those. It's my suggestion always to look for the low sodium versions because you can always add your own salt in later. So if you can, get a low sodium version because they tend to be pretty high in sodium and salty. The other thing that you can do is you can buy what they call bouillon or vegetable base. And they come in powdered forms and in little kind of little tablets that are shelf stable, but you can also buy a refrigerated. They come in a jar and then you just add by the teaspoon into water to create broth. That's my favorite way to do it because I like to make them really dilute and just add a little bit of it in. You can always add more, but it's hard to take it away. So the way I use those vegetable broth bases is I usually do them about 25% or 33% of the concentration called for on the jar. And I make my stock or my soup or my my dish with that. And then if at the end I feel like it needs a little more flavor, then I add a little bit more. But I usually start with less and then add more as needed. It's one of those things though that if you don't have a lot of money to spend, you could skip the broth and you can just use water in most anything like soup or, this could have been just water instead. And then you might need to add a little extra seasoning to bump it up because it's, a flavor component. But if you don't have stock, don't feel like you can't cook. You can do just water.
Thanks. That's very informative. I also realized that Slot just joined us, so I wanted to welcome her to our meeting. It's a student with whom I had the pleasure to chat a couple of times last semester. So welcome, Slot.
Hi, thank you.
All right, Valerie. Sorry, I've been chatty. I should be.
No,
you do the talking.
It's okay. It's okay. So as you can see, my stew is starting to boil. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reduce the heat and let that simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes. And meanwhile this simmers, Ryan is gonna take it away and talk about his process for making the chicken version.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan. And so right now what I have going on over here is, let me go ahead and switch my camera. So I have pretty much everything Valerie mentioned. It's already going on in this yummy looking pot over here. So I already had it simmering for about 15-20 minutes. And I had practically the same ingredients. I had stock, carrots, veggies. I had some onions, garlic. I put a little bit of ginger in mine. So I have the chicken version, and right now I have the chicken for us right over here. And what I'm gonna do is I had the chicken also simmering in that pot earlier for about 15-20 minutes, but I need to shred up the chicken. So these are some boneless thighs, and of course, if you're serving other people, you want to use some gloves. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shred these up. I'm gonna throw it back into my simmering pot over here and simmering on medium to low heat so the vegetables don't get burned and everything mends its flavors together. So I'm just shredding them by hand. Usually works best like that. You get your fingers in there. There's not many tools that can mimic that. And then after, I will be mixing in some other ingredients that Valerie has not mentioned because we throw it in a little later. What I have is I'm gonna mix some of the stew that's already reducing and simmering with some peanut butter. That's how we're going to mix the peanut butter into the African peanut stew. And I'll also be throwing in some tomatoes. We're throwing that in later because if that simmers for over 30 minutes, it's gonna be mashed tomatoes. And I don't know if that's good, but I probably prefer mashed potatoes. So I have most of the shredded right now. Hopefully you can see it's in good shreds. I'm going to add it to my stew. I don't like the skin, so I'm going to toss that out.
I may have a question. Because I like the skin, and is eating the skin of the chicken really unhealthy or not that much?
I wouldn't. I would say it's a little bit unhealthier. The skin has a lot of has the subcutaneous fat layer under it, first and foremost, and then it has a lot of hair. Sometimes the chicken still has hair on it, and as well as anything bad that the chicken has been eating and it's been circling through its system. I feel like a lot of the toxins get stuck in the skin too. So in my culture, it's honorable to not eat skin, but a lot of times I would eat skin too. I just wouldn't recommend it in a stew because you want that nice like little textures of meat and not big slabs of skin. So right now I have this going on. I'm gonna give it a good whirl. Make sure nothing burns on the bottom. And then if there was no other questions, I can go ahead and proceed with the peanut butter mixing. Any other questions? Any questions you have for me? We're
Could
okay.
you use like a compromise approach where you like put the skin in, but then you like take it out later? Like,
oh yeah,
then you like can
Mhm.
get some of the flavor, but then like you're not eating it, so you're like maybe
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
compromise.
So again, like I said before, I had this chicken with the skin already in the stew simmering before I on to the camera to show. But the whole chicken, I had actually these pieces of chicken. I have some extra ones. I had these big ones with the skin on it. I had it dumped in here, and it was simmering for about 20 minutes before I had it cooled down enough so I can handle it with my hands to shred it. But yeah, I did cook it with the you know, love the skin, you know, means go ahead and go for it. Like I said,
He's cutting in and out a little bit there. And I think I'm going to echo what he said.
Yeah.
And I put this in the comments, but you know, the skin of the chicken has more of the fat and more of the cholesterol associated with it. So if you need to be careful and mindful of your cholesterol intake, you would avoid the skin for sure. But, you know, if you've got a nice piece of grilled chicken or a nice piece of roasted chicken and it's got that crispy skin on it, it's hard to resist. I say enjoy it. Just be mindful of it, particularly if you need to watch your cholesterol.
Yeah, thank
In this case, when you're cooking it like this, it gets kind of flabby and soft. It's not really that appetizing anyway. So this is a good time to ditch it because it's not going to be the most appetizing. I'd save my skin for a nice crispy piece of grilled or roasted chicken instead.
Thanks so much for the answer. It looks like we might have lost Ryan over. Oh, he's back. Ryan, you're muted.
hi, sorry you guys. I
No
forgot to
problem.
mention earlier, I am a little bit far away from my modem and router, and this was my worst nightmare of the presentation, was that this was happening. This would happen, and it did. And I didn't forewarn you guys, so I am so sorry about that.
That's okay. I've had worse nightmares. Now everything's fine.
Okay, cool. Again, I apologize if it happens again. So what I was in the middle of was I had the peanut butter right here. So I used a little bit less than what was recommended. I still think the peanut flavor is going to be a little bit overwhelming because Valerie had a test run the other day, and she said the peanut flavoring was a little bit overwhelming. So I'm gonna get some of this hot stock or hot stew that's already been brewing for a little bit. I'm gonna mix it in here with my peanut butter. Get it a nice creamy texture, and that way I don't just throw in a blob of peanut butter in the pot. And that way it's already liquefied, pre-mixed, and it'll mix into the stew a lot easier. All right, looks kind of together. The peanut butter is still really thick, but the heat will definitely mend it together much better.
Continuing on with the vegetarian version as well. You're also going to do the same. I'm also going to be doing the same steps as Ryan. So I'm going to, once my pot has finished simmering, I'm going to take a little bit of that and add it on to my peanut butter in a small pot. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of that. You can't really see it on camera, but I have my peanut butter here. I'm just going to add a bit. And I'm just going to mix that. You can always add more. I'm going to just start with a little bit just to see how it gets. And then if I need more, I'll definitely add some more. You want it to be kind of like just a smooth texture. You don't really want any clumps. I'm just going to mix that.
It's a very good idea to do both a meat version and a vegetarian version. I think that's pretty good for the students that don't want to eat meat to have a vegetarian option.
So we have more and more, you know, people with preferences and different dietary restrictions, and certainly vegetarianism and veganism are growing. So within our department, the nutrition department, we have a lot of people who are vegetarian or vegan. So we try to make sure that we have something for them. But in the general public, it's also growing. So being sensitive to that and helping people to enjoy all different foods. We took this dish, which was made with chicken, and adapted it to make it vegan and vegetarian. But I think actually it's delicious with the sweet potatoes and the greens added in, which are also very much a part of the culture in the South.
Would it be simple to make a vegan version? Yeah.
So this actually would be vegan if you make this with vegetable broth. So the way that Valerie is making it, it is vegan because she's using vegetable broth. There's vegetables, vegetable broth, peanuts, and then she's going to be adding in sweet potatoes and greens. So her version is actually vegan.
Cool.
You can also add some tofu,
You could.
some chickpeas. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to add on that was this can be a base recipe, and there are, of course, many more traditional or cultural or, family preferences where they use like tofu, like Valerie said, as like a sub. Chickpeas, okra is a very popular Southern, vegetable. And by all means, any other vegetables or other protein subs can definitely work, or herbs, and give it your own herbs and spices. I did add a pinch of curry powder to mine. It's going to help make the peanut butter not so overwhelming. Like, you won't just taste peanut butter in this stew. It will also, with a blend of curry powder, and the recipe says use cayenne pepper and some red pepper flakes to give it that kick. That's a great idea. For my sake, it's going to be me and my parents eating this, and we are not very spicy fans. So we're gonna try and limit that.
Also to mention, if you are using seasonings, for example, if you're going to be using dried ginger instead of fresh ginger, you're going to want to use, if you're going to use, let's say, like half a teaspoon, you're going to only want to use about a pinch of ginger. And that's because the dried version is going to be a lot more concentrated, and that flavor is going to be a lot more powerful and strong.
Yeah, so the original recipe calls for grated fresh ginger or minced fresh ginger. It's a nice, that with the curry and the peanuts is a really nice flavor combination. But if you don't have fresh ginger, not everybody does in the dorm. I know you guys don't have as much. If you do happen to have ginger, you could throw in a pinch of ginger. Yeah, if you didn't have either, just leave it out, right? It's hard to have a whole pantry worth of spices when you're living in the dorms. Totally get it. They do sell now a little tube of ginger. So all of these herbs, if you tend to cook a lot and you don't have time to go to the grocery store very often, if you go to the refrigerated section in the produce section, they sell these little tubes, and there's one with ginger, there's one with garlic, there's one with cilantro, there's one with basil. And then you can keep that in your refrigerator. And so you can just add that in, a teaspoon or a tablespoon of it, depending on what you're making, and then put it back into your refrigerator, and it lasts for quite a while. So that's another option if you do cook a lot and you want to have these things, but you don't get to go to the store very often.
Is there, I'm looking at the stew boiling. Is there like a specific consistency that you're looking for? Is it just kind of personal preference? How runny should it be? Or how thick?
Yeah, so I'm looking, I like it low boil so that the vegetables don't get burnt. And I think it, just a slow and steady wins the race. I think the slower you simmer it, the longer you can, and the longer you can, the more unified the flavors become. So I think this simmer is perfecto.
Ryan, I think
Ryan,
you hit it on the nail on the head too. So a simmer is just below a boil, or at a very, very gentle boil. So he's cooking it, allowing the flavors to marry and allowing the vegetables to soften. The chicken's already cooked. So at this point, you're just making sure that those carrots and onions are cooked through and that the flavor has some time to develop.
Ryan, would you say that this is something that you just have to stew on?
Yes, absolutely. Just got stew on this.
So on Valerie's side, though, she's going to be adding in, I think she's adding in sweet potatoes, right, Valerie? And
Yeah, just a bit of sweet potatoes, mostly squash.
Okay.
Right
So-
now, I just added the peanut butter back into the mixture, and with that, I'm gonna be adding some diced tomatoes. This. Just a pinch of the curry powder. And a pinch of cayenne pepper and the crushed red pepper flakes, just a tad.
Already looks so good.
And again, if you wanted a little bit more spicy, then you could always add more.
Do you know if it's traditionally spicy, the recipe as originally made, or not necessarily?
So the original, many of the African cuisines, and so Africa is such a big continent, right? So there's a lot of variation in the different foods that are consumed across Africa, but many of them do incorporate a lot of spice. When Africans were brought primarily, they were across America at first, but primarily in the South. And in the South, there was that availability of chili peppers. So they did incorporate quite a bit of chili peppers. And so you do see a lot of spiciness in these types of foods. The peanuts really kind of mellow it out, though. So it doesn't become too spicy at that point. But a little bit of spice is always a nice touch here.
So right now I just added in some of my squash and a little bit of my sweet potato, and I'm just mixing it a bit. So after I've added all that, I'm gonna let this sit and simmer for about 20 minutes.
So again, I was a couple steps ahead of Valerie. Just for this demo's sake, we could somewhat show the full procedure of this cooking, of this recipe. And I am approaching the late stages. I just did a little taste test, always taste it, so you don't make 3-4 full servings of something that you don't really like or aren't unsatisfied with. I tasted it, did taste a little bit bland. So I get some salt and pepper for taste, and we can go ahead and adjust that. And later on, before serving, I will also give it a squeeze of lemon. I got my de-seeded lemon right over here. Again, just for kind of like a top off, different flavor.
Oh, Jen, are you cooking along?
I am
I'm sorry?
trying.
How's it coming, Jen? Are you making vegetarian or chicken?
Vegetarian.
Yay! I can't wait to hear what you say about it. My family loved this.
I mean, it sounds great. It looks good.
I'm just adjusting my camera a bit. So meanwhile, my stew simmers. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the no bake cookie recipe. And to begin, you're gonna need in a microwave safe bowl, you're gonna add about half a cup of honey.
So do you entirely replace sugar with honey, Valerie?
You for this recipe or
Yeah, for this recipe.
so for this recipe, to make it vegan actually for this recipe, you can use syrup, or you can also use the sorry if I mispronounce it, agave nectar. You can use that instead of honey. Usually for pancakes, personally for pancakes and stuff, I prefer honey. I just like the taste better. The syrup gives me like a really artificial taste I don't like, so I usually always go for honey. With the honey, you're also going to add in about 3/4 of a cup of peanut butter. I keep my peanut butter in a saran wrap because I don't like to put my peanut butter directly on the measuring cups. It gets really sticky and stuck onto there. So I just prefer to kind of put it on a saran wrap and measure it like that. Makes it way more easier.
I was going to say a tip for getting the honey out is to spray your measuring cup with nonstick spray before you put the honey in, and that helps it to slide out of your measuring cup as well.
So, Professor Kubota, you're saying something about vegan honey. Do you want to say it for everyone? I'm not aware of that.
So honey's not considered vegan because if you're a really strict vegan, it could possibly have some. Well, it comes from honeybees, right? So there's that, and then it could possibly have some insect parts in it. So for that reason, vegan honey's not considered vegan, right? But there's vegan versions of honey available if you want to have something that tastes like honey and you're vegan. And one of them's apple based, and so they just essentially condense down apple juice till it becomes really syrupy and honey like. It's delicious actually. And there's also a date based one that's quite nice, I hear. So if you're vegan, you can find vegan honey, or you can use maple syrup like Valerie said.
So right now what I just did is put my bowl with the honey and peanut butter in the microwave. And I did that for about 45 seconds to a minute. I also wanted to mention another ingredient, which is oat flour. You could purchase this at any store, any grocery store, but if you do not have oat flour, you can just get some quick minute oats and put it in the blender and just blend it up, and it'll create a flour like substance. So you could definitely like substitute that for this. So this just got out of the microwave. And now I'm just gonna mix everything together. At this point, you can also add in the vanilla extract, just about a teaspoon of it. Just mix that.
Again, it already looks good.
So you're just making sure it's smooth, Valerie?
Yeah, I'm just making sure it's smooth, not too runny. It's not, you don't want it to be too runny or too thick. Can you guys see that? Oh, it's a little bit runny. But it's also going to thicken with the oat flour, which is what I'm going to add next.
And then is the oat flour gluten-free for those of us? My partner is gluten-free, so.
The oat flour,
Yeah.
I believe, yes, these the oat flour is gluten-free.
So if you get gluten-free oats, it is. So if you are somebody who has celiac and you have to be off of gluten completely, you do have to look for gluten-free oats. Oats themselves are naturally gluten-free, but oftentimes they're grown next to fields of wheat and they're processed on the same equipment as wheat, so they can get contaminated with some gluten. So oats themselves aren't gluten-free because of that issue, but you can get certified gluten-free oats. So Quaker sells them. So if you need to be gluten-free, look for the certified gluten-free oats or gluten-free oat flour to ensure that you're getting gluten-free. If you're just gluten sensitive, you'll probably be fine. But for those who have a true allergy or who have celiac and have to be gluten-free, then you want to make sure that you're getting gluten-free oats.
Thanks for the tip.
And Jen is saying if you can't get the gluten-free oats, then try almond flour or coconut flour. Yeah. Those are good alternatives. It's nice now that even like Quaker, who's the biggest, I think they have more oats on the market than anybody else. They have a gluten-free version now.
How's your stew going, Jen? Thumbs up.
So far, so good. I have a question about the different different peanut butters. So you know how they have the natural versions of peanut butter and then they separate? Why do they separate more than, I'm sure it's processing, something about processing, right? Is that right?
Do one of the students want to take this? I hate to always jump in. I want to allow the students to take it if they want to.
I might try to answer that.
Excellent.
I think it's because like the Jif ones or the Skippies have hydrogenated oils, which make it like a creamy consistency. And then for the natural ones, they don't. So like, I don't know, like chemistry wise, why the oil rises to the top, but I know that the hydrogenated oil like keeps it like, you know, creamy. Right, Professor?
Yeah. So I'll add on to that. So yeah, the hydrogenated oils, what they do is they add that hydrogen atom, and what that hydrogen atom does to the oils is it holds everything together, kind of like an emulsifier. So The reason why the natural ones get separated is because they don't have that hydrogen atom in there holding everything together. And that's why the hydrogenated oils are considered unhealthy, because they turn liquid fat, as you see the liquid oil in the natural peanut butters, into a solid fat, as you see creamy textured peanut butter, no oil, it's not liquid. Yeah, that's why preferably we want the unhydrogenated ones, the ones that do separate, the ones where you do have to do a little bit of extra work to become healthy. But, you know, for convenience sakes, for on the go purposes, you know, the creamy one is a little bit more convenient.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Would both version or both options work in the stew?
Absolutely, yeah. So I actually use a Skippy or Jif. I use the Skippy one. That one is the unhealthy one where it is creamy textured and unseparated. I don't know which one you Valerie used, but yes, you can definitely use both for either recipes, the cookies or the stew.
Here's another question for the stew, about the stew or the cookie, actually. Do you think any other butter from nuts, different nuts would work, or not so much? Like almond butter is fairly easy to find. Would that work in the stew or not so much?
I think the peanut butter, and probably in more traditional recipes, they probably use actual peanuts. And in our more simplified American version, we're using peanut butter. So to answer the question, your own recipe, you can definitely modify however you'd like. I know that the almond butter isn't as doesn't have that peanut butter flavor. It has more of a subtle butter flavor, not as strong. And I think if you want that peanut essence in your stew, it's more definitely better to use peanut butter or hence peanuts. Yeah. Actual peanuts.
Thanks for this. Yeah, it's true that almond flour is quite a different flavor, maybe something like cashew butter, but then it's harder to find probably, and probably more expensive.
Definitely more expensive.
So I think you could use any of them. You know, if you're going to make this and you don't have peanut butter, but you've got almond butter, by all means do. But if you want that traditional flavor, if you really want to try something that's got that traditional African-American flavor, then do the peanuts if you can.
Thanks for this.
And Jen, there's no shame in any food. Use what you have. And if you like Jif, use it.
The stew is smelling so good though, by the way.
I was looking for a picture of it because I normally take pictures of most food. My kids get so tired of it because every time we're sitting down to eat, I'm like, wait, I got to take a picture. And they're like, can we just eat already? But I don't, for some reason, have a picture of this one. Sorry. It's really pretty too, with the sweet potatoes and the greens in it.
Yeah, it has a really nice color.
Yeah. Valerie looks like she's got all of her oats incorporated.
Yeah, as you can see, it got a lot thicker, and that's kind of the consistency you want. So yeah, once it looks like this, we can go ahead and start making some balls. You want to get about 2 tablespoons of dough in your hand and just roll and make it into a ball. So once it's into a ball-like shape, you can just press it down into like a cookie-like shape. Just leave it there to set a little bit. you want to make some other cookies.
Do these have to set in the refrigerator or just on the counter?
You could set these just on the counter, it's fine.
Is it possible to make these heart shaped like last time?
I can try.
No pressure.
Yeah. Hold on. Put too much on that one.
Is it sticky?
Just a bit. I don't know if you could tell. My hands are a bit greasy, and that's from the peanut butter. If I can make this heart shaped.
Walter, you're making Valerie work.
No, it's good. I really like cake decorating. I really like pastries. Designing with chocolate. I enjoy all of that. So
It
this
was
is good.
If anybody can do this, it's Valerie. She's the one that comes up with all our cute stuff on Whisk. The little Thanksgiving turkey, marshmallow turkeys, chocolate covered marshmallow turkeys. That was Valerie. She's
Yeah,
very
here's where you can get artistic with it, and that's where all the high-end bakers get differentiated with the regular bakers. They throw in that artistic aspect to their creation. That looks really good, Valerie.
Thanks.
Oh, look at that. Skills.
Jennifer's asking if you could add in chocolate chips.
Yeah, you can definitely add in chocolate chips. White chocolate chips, milk chocolate. Yeah, you would add them in after you've taken it out of the microwave. I would say let it cool down for a bit, just because if you add in the chocolate chips right away, they might melt. So just kind of mix it and like wait for it to cool down, and then it should be good to go.
All right, my friends, and I'm just gonna steal your guys' attention while Valerie's go ahead and doing that. My stew was ready, and I just want to present it to you folks before it becomes dead and even more thick. And here it is with a bowl of rice on the side. You can go ahead and eat that with or without. I added some bay leaves, dried bay leaves and thyme on top, just for design and for the presentation. And of course it adds, a little bit of that herb taste into the stew as well. Once I mix it, I can't wait to try it.
Looks so delicious. Great presentation.
Yeah, unfortunately this is virtual, so no one gets to try it, but that might be a good thing too, because I'm no professional chef.
It looks really good, Ryan.
Oh, thanks.
It looks really good.
Thanks. I should put it right here. Oh, you guys can't see it.
I like the garnish you added on top. I think that's a nice flair to it.
Thank you. Yeah, you can usually, I think you can stew it with the bay leaves before when it was simmering for, 20, 40 minutes. And it'll be more infused into the stew, but I only had dry ones, and, you don't want to use the dry ones because they'll crumble and then you'll get leaves in your mouth when you're drinking the stew, and that's not yummy for most people.
Thanks. Well, it seems great. So we've talked about the different kind of butters and nut butters you can use. And then the idea is that the peanut one is the more traditional. But in terms of vegetable, let us say that, I don't have all of the vegetables to make this stew. Are there other vegetables that could be used, maybe in the vegetarian version or even in the meat version?
Yeah, there's like that tofu option for like protein, or again, okra is very traditional vegetable in the South, for inclusions of that. But I can only imagine spinach will be good in this. Yeah,
Any type of
more
green,
onions,
really.
bell peppers. Yeah, green beans.
And
Green
any
beans would be.
greens as well. Green beans would be good, but in Southern cooking and in African American cooking, they incorporate a lot of greens. So that's one thing that, it was part of the diet in Africa. Then they came to the Americas, and they foraged for greens. They farmed. They were some were allowed to farm, some weren't. But when they did, they would farm greens. And then they were also given the tops of vegetables. So if you think about it, they were given the carrot tops. They were given the tops of the radishes and all the other vegetables that they were preparing for the people in the main house. They'd get the tops, and so those got incorporated in. So you just see a ton of greens added into things. So you could totally load this up with greens, and it would be very traditional.
Yeah, Jennifer says green beans, and then Walter says Swiss chard, sorry, which seems like a good option to me also. I like chard. Maybe even collard green, would that be an option?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that collard greens was also very, very popular in the South as well.
And if you like okra, you can find it fresh sometimes at the market. During the summer, it's easier to find. You can find it at Indian markets. I hear that Indian markets have it. But you can also find it frozen, which you have to look for it because it's usually not like in the middle. In the middle, they've got the peas and the broccoli that everybody buys. But if you look at the top or maybe the bottom, you can usually find okra, either sliced or whole or both. And then you can just throw that in straight from frozen, and it can bulk up the stew as well. So okra is a great one.
Yeah, that's great. Jen says that they have frozen okra at Trader Joe's. Yeah, I'm only familiar with okra in the context of Indian dishes in Indian restaurants. So often they're very spicy, and I like them a lot. But I know that it's not a crowd pleaser. A lot of people don't like okra.
In the South, it's traditional. People are eating okra left and right. They eat it stewed. They eat it oftentimes fried, fried okra, dipped in some ranch dressing. So okra is completely traditional throughout the South and would be incorporated into a lot of African American dishes. Yeah.
Good to know. Is that another ingredient that came from Africa, or is it a
Yes.
native to North America? No, it's from Africa.
No, I think it is. It was brought here with the African slave trade. Yeah.
How did my heart turn out? Looks good.
Yes.
That is stunning.
Looks really good.
Super
Seriously,
impressed.
So good.
So if you guys noticed, I actually made these lines, and I just did that using a fork. And this is traditional in peanut butter cookies, and that's just like to let people know these cookies have peanuts in them.
Yeah, that's smart. I didn't know. I knew that it was the traditional design for the cookies, but I didn't know that it was to let people know that they had peanuts in them. I'm guessing it's maybe allergy related or something like that, so that people can avoid them if they're allergic.
Those look delicious, Valerie. So about how many cookies does your recipe make?
I believe it makes about around 12 to 15, I believe. Like, depends on how big your cookies are.
How's your stew coming along?
My stew, it's coming along good. Let me wash my hands really quick there. Let me switch camera.
Jen, are you okay there? I saw you laughing really hard.
I don't know what you're talking about. There wasn't anything in the chat that was funny. But I think you mean connect. Oh, because it's, yeah, connect 4 because there's 16 squares.
Yeah.
Look at the color of that stew. It's so pretty.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
Like Ryan, I added some rice to mine. I made some rice, so. Just a quick mention, if you did add tofu, you would want to add that in the last 10 to 15 minutes. In the last 10 to 15 minutes of your stew simmering. And any leafy green vegetables, you want to add that at the end, just because they'll cook faster.
Is the traditional recipe made with white rice or any kind of rice?
I'm not too sure how the traditional one is, but I usually pair everything with white rice. That's my favorite kind of rice. So yeah, I just did mine with white rice. But this is how the stew looks.
So in the United States, that looks beautiful, Valerie. In the United States, particularly in the South, rice is a really traditional accompaniment. In Africa, it would be any sort of starch. And so it really depends on which region you're at, what the starch might be. It might be cassava, it might be teff, so there's a lot of different starches. And oftentimes they're made into what they call something called fufu. Has anybody heard of that? Yeah. So they make it into this really starchy kind of paste, and then they just break off pieces of it and use it to eat the stew with. But that could be from a variety of different starches. But rice was brought to the Americas with the slaves. The slaves were brought to grow the rice because they knew how to grow it well in Africa, and the climate on the East Coast and the South just lent itself to rice growing. So we got the rice plantations evolved out of that. So it's a big part. There's a lot of rice dishes that are really common in the South and a part of African-American food culture in particular.
I've never tasted fufu, but I've heard of it. I'd like to try it.
I want to try it. I think we're going to move back to the share on the PowerPoint, and they have some restaurants near campus. They're suggesting some Black-owned and African restaurants near campus. So that would be a great place to go try them, Etienne.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was actually thinking about that when you mentioned that, if there's any Western African restaurants in the Bay or Senegalese. I know that San Jose has a big Ethiopian food. There's an Ethiopian community and also Ethiopian restaurants, so on San Carlos, but I don't know about any West African restaurants or the ones that would use fufu. I don't know if actually fufu is throughout Africa, or is it mostly West Africa?
I think it's mostly West Africa, but I think most African cultures have a version of it. And in Ethiopia, it's more of the injera, or the fermented bread, that flat bread that's made with the teff and the teff flour, and they use that. But fufu is pretty common throughout Africa in some form or another.
All right. Should we move back to you mentioned Professor Kubota, you wanted to move back to the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, I can move back to it. I just wanted to show you guys quickly. This is how my stew ended up turning out with the rice.
Yeah.
So you have your lunch or dinner and a quick little dessert.
Yeah, looks delicious. Take your time, Valerie. I don't want to rush you in any way if there's other things that you'd like to feature.
Oh no, this is it. This is the West African groundnut stew and the no-bake peanut butter cookies.
They all look delicious, and it's interesting to see the slightly different version the one prepared by Ian and the one prepared by Valerie. Thanks very much for cooking this. I think it's a very good recipe. It's also a one pot recipe, so friendly for our residents who might only have access to one burner, either in a collective kitchen or I don't think that the cooking plates are allowed in the rooms, but I think that could be made in a collective kitchen like the ones we have in the dorms.
Yes, so Valerie is is showing all the Black-owned businesses that we found on Yelp. And there are a lot of African restaurants throughout the Bay Area, but these are just the few that we found like around the San Jose area. So there's this like tab on Yelp where you could like find Black-owned businesses. So that's where we were able to find these.
Yeah, thanks so much for showing that. I was unaware of most of these restaurants, actually. I've seen Backyard in downtown San Jose, but I didn't know about Sandy's, Oyo, the Caribbean one. Anyone who's logged in tonight have tried any of those and can tell us what's their experience with them? I've been wanting to try Walia for a while.
Backyard is really good. I like their oxtail. Delicious. And I've been to Coconuts as well. I didn't know Coconuts was in San Jose, but there was one in Palo Alto that I had went to, and I liked it as well. But Backyard's my favorite on this list.
I can also vouch for Backyard. Absolutely delicious. I have to figure out which of the Ethiopian ones I've tried. I know I tried one of them. I'm blanking. I want to say it's the last one on the list, but I want to double check before I vouch for sure. But yeah, definitely some good options.
I was going to ask you because I don't know if everyone knows this, Walter is the only San Jose native of all the faculty and residents.
Yes, it's definitely. I'll have to double check with my parents because I actually may have been to both of these Ethiopian restaurants. I was just thinking in the last like 2 years that I've been back, but as a San Jose native, I've definitely eaten some quality Ethiopian food in high school and back in the day. Yeah, it's been a minute, but I'll do some research. But these look really exciting and encourage everyone to try them if they haven't had an opportunity to yet.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. Valerie, Ryan, Professor Kubota, is there anything else that you'd like to feature? Oh, the last slide. Yeah.
Yeah, for more recipes and other cooking sources, you can follow WHISK on Instagram and visit their website listed here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mercy.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Professor Kubota, would you like to say a few words before we bring this workshop to a close? Or
yeah, I was just wanted to say thank you to everyone who did come, and the recording will be available. But really, it was a great opportunity for us to be able to highlight African American food and the contributions of African Americans to our food culture here in America. I think that's really what we wanted to highlight today. So I hope everybody will try the recipe at some point. I've talked about it for a long time in my food and culture classes, but I had never tried it before. So I made it this year for the first time, and I have to say I was really amazed at how delicious it was. And I really feel like food is the great unifier. So if you're curious about another culture, it's a great way to learn and to really share with someone else. Food is such an integral part of who we are. And it's one of those, really important cultural habits that we mainly hold on to. And it's a way for us to celebrate. And so if you really want to get to know somebody and get to know their culture, then share a meal with them and be open to trying new foods. I think it's just a really great way to build your cultural competence. And here at San Jose State, we're such a diverse school. We're one of the most diverse universities in the US, I think. If you look at our ethnic makeup here at San Jose State, we really are very diverse. So we have that going for us. Our student population is diverse, but then we also have all this diversity in our community. So you want to try anything, you can pretty much find any type of food within, a few mile radius of campus. So we're blessed that way. I encourage everybody to step out and try all these different foods that you have access to and enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Professor Caboto. Words of wisdom, that food is a great unifier. And also, I'm putting this out there for the students that might be watching the recording at a later time. If you ever would like the food of a specific cultural community to be featured in one of those workshops, get in touch with us. It'll be a pleasure to kind of organize events around dishes or the food of cultural communities that you personally relate to. So I know that I've learned a lot tonight about the history of peanuts. I'm leaving the workshop with ideas for, and I've learned how to make a peanut stew, and also I have some ideas about the restaurants that I want to try. So that's a very productive evening for me, and I hope that it's a productive evening for all of us. So thanks everyone. I'm going to stop the recording there and then see you next time.
Thank you, Tien.